Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari. This is Great Big History Podcast, and today we do the death of capitalism and the Great Depression. Part 1, Capitalism, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, this lecture is still 10 questions. Actually, it's 12, but it's still part of our 10 question series. But this one is so big that we may have to break things up. And so there's kind of 3 parts in our death of capitalism, Great Depression, and responses to the Great Depression. And so we're starting kind of there. And so we'll see how it goes. And we don't want you to be like a 90-minute, 2-hour episode if we could break it up into smaller pieces. So, part 1, capitalism. Because we have to kind of talk about what is capitalism and the capitalism of the 1920s. And the ideal capitalism, though it's not quite the same, but it's still in the same family, still the same genre, is laissez-faire capitalism. The capitalism of the 1920s really try to get back to the 1890s. Try to really get back, get rid of the anti-monopoly, anti-regulations, anti-high taxes of 1900 to 1920 through the First World War. It was seen really as kind of an, not so much a mistake as a hiccup, because laissez-faire capitalism was kind of the system since the 1500s and is in Adam Smith, is in The Wealth of Nations in 1776. It's kind of the ideal form. And so we have to start there. Because even today, when we talk about capitalism, the idea is that laissez-faire capitalism is the ideal. You know, when you have a president like President Trump did say, I cut so many regulations, well, at some point, what's the end goal of that? And the end goal of that is laissez-faire capitalism. So we have to define capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system where private individuals own property and the means of production in order to make a profit. And then, and this is why it's capitalism, reinvest the profits into growing the operation. See, there's other systems that we have had where the economic system allows for the creation of a profit. But feudalism or mercantilism, the idea wasn't to reinvest the profits into growing the operation. Renaissance lords bought land outside the cities. French nobility, or even the characters in Jane Austen. The characters in Jane Austen are not building businesses. They're buying basically Bank of England debt. They're buying bonds. They're buying 6% interest rate bonds, investments. That's it. That's all they're doing. Capitalism, on the other hand, is all about the growth of capital. Is all overwhelming about not spending it, but reinvesting it. Now, laissez-faire means to leave alone. It's French. And it's the idea that government should not regulate or interfere with a profit-oriented business beyond the regulations to assure the workings of that market. Even the most libertarian, laissez-faire, free marketer says you still need laws to keep other companies from cheating, right? They say, oh, here's chicken and it's really a person. You can't have that. You need to have safe spaces for you to have rules in the marketplace so that everyone operates the same. The idea is that there's always going to be some regulations, and those regulations are to provide a floor that all businesses can kind of stand upon to be equal, so that no one business has an unfair starting advantage over others or operating advantage. an immoral operating advantage. That's the big one. And so there's going to always be regulations. The idea is that even in the freest form of capitalism, government still has legitimacy. And so in our pictures on our video, we have the bull of Wall Street. And if you've ever gone down to Lower Manhattan and you would like to go see it, you could go see the bull. And it was the symbol for one of the big investment banks, Merrill Lynch, maybe? I don't remember which one off the top of my head. But it's the bull market. It's the power of capitalism. It's a symbol. It's a great, if you've never seen it, you should go and see it. It is a great, great statue. And then a few years ago, I mean, maybe going on a decade now, a investment bank, a investment firm, hired a sculptor to make a new sculpture. And what it is a little girl with her hands on her hips, skirt in the breeze, ponytail in the back, and she is staring down the bull. And this became a big thing because the original sculptor of the bull is like, that changes the meaning of my bull. And that's exactly why they did it. That's exactly what they did. So by putting her there, it changes the meaning of the capitalism. It changes the meaning of the power and dynamic of the bull market, showing in a way that women, that feminism can resist kind of the worst power of capitalism. It's completely, it's great on its own and it's great together. But the sculptor who was upset about this, he's not wrong. It does change the meaning of his bull, his sculpture, by putting them together. So it was a little publicity thing, and it's interesting how by all this you're talking about that little girl is regulations. She is the limits on that bull. She is staring down that bull. So what does capitalism care about? And if you have seen Breaking Bad, we're going to make a bunch of Breaking Bad references here because Breaking Bad is a kind of our most recent kind of best example of this. Even better than Succession or Billions or what's the other one? Industry, all these one word, HBO shows. Breaking Bad really reflects what it's all about. And what is it about? It's about capital. It's about money. Money is privileged and protected. Money can cross borders. People cannot, right? I need a passport. I need a passport to go to England, but my money can be there in a second. I can put my money in a Bank of England account or a Bank of Scotland account, and boom, it's there. Money is taxed less than people. Money lives longer. And if you go, wait, money isn't taxed less than people, well, that's what capital gains is. My labor is taxed at 25%. My investments are taxed at 15 to 18%. My capital is actually taxed less than myself, my own labor, my income. And it lives longer, right? We all do this because we have wills. And what is the will there for? The will is to tell people after I'm dead what to do with my money. My money lives on. Ben Franklin's, he left $1 million or something to Philadelphia. I think he left $1 million to Philadelphia and $1 million to Baltimore or Boston. And that money is still there. It was there for grants to help young men get into various different professions, to learn trades. It's still existing. St. Jude, through Danny Thomas. Danny Thomas started the St. Jude Hospital to help children with cancer with whatever his initial investment was. That money is still there, earning more capital. Money keeps going and going and going and going. So Ben Franklin's money has been around for, what is it, 200 years, 207, almost 300 years. So for capitalism, the purpose of life is the accumulation and use of money. And the use of money is not to spend it, to gain pleasures. The use of it is to invest it to make more money, to make higher the accumulation. So what does capitalism not care about? Well, that's Jesse in Breaking Bad. It doesn't care about life. It doesn't care about ethics. It doesn't care about morality. It doesn't care about equality. You have seen, if you have watched Breaking Bad, you've watched Walter White see Jesse's girlfriend have a moment to see, he sees something bad happen. And he has a moment to intervene. And he doesn't. Why? Because she was stopping Jesse from helping him make a lot of money. And the thought was, well, if Jane's not there anymore, Jesse will make more money. Jesse will help me make more money. Well, what does it do to Jesse? Well, here we are. He's in our GIF listening to Jane's voicemail over and over and over again just to hear her voice. Capitalism doesn't care about your ethics. It doesn't care about your morality. It will put 6-year-olds to work. It will murder old people. It will murder young people. It doesn't care about life, ethics, morality, or equality. It will chew people up and spit them out. The purpose is profit and reinvestment growth. More profit equals more reinvestment equals more growth. That's what it cares about. Workers are a means to an end. The environment is a resource to be used. Death is an inconvenience. Death of a worker, death of an owner. Walt Disney's death was an inconvenience to the Walt Disney Company. It kept going. Now, it had a period of trauma we'll talk about, of listlessness, because no one knew how to run the Walt Disney Company without Walt Disney. But Disney's still around. It's still one of the big 4 or 5 major movie companies. It still makes billions of dollars every year. So death is just an inconvenience. Workers die, employees die, customers die. This is, if you've ever watched Fight Club, that's the job for Ed Norton, right? He goes around and he sees what's wrong with what happened when a customer of a car company dies, and goes, was it caused by the customer? Was it their fault, or was it the fault of the machine? If it's the fault of the machine, then they figure out how many times that machine fault is likely to happen. They literally did this with the Pinto. The Pinto was a Ford car that blew up, but it only blew up if it was rear-ended, so it was hit from behind, at a certain speed, above a certain speed, while it was making a left turn and the blinker light was on. That's why it was making the left turn. If the left blinker light was on and it was hit at a certain speed, then it would blow up. And so they did a math and said, well, it will only happen something like 12,000 times. And then they multiplied by what the settlement would be per each time. 100,000, 200,000 a person. What do poor people take? The Pinto was a cheap car, so it was like, what will poor people take? Oh, they'll take a $200,000, right? And you multiply that by the 12,000, you get a number, and you go, are we making more money selling Pintos than we're going to lose by settling these lawsuits? Oh, we're going to make a lot more money. Then do that. Then it doesn't matter if those people get blown up. Doesn't matter if those children get. All right, those children in the back seat, they're worth $500,000, right? So they're baked in. Death is an inconvenience. Inequality is actually the point. There needs to be rich people and there needs to be poor people. The more money in less hands equals efficiency. Capitalism doesn't want lots of people to have a little bit of money. It wants a few people to have massive amounts of money so they can invest that massive amounts of money. Size. It's simply size. We talked about this with Darwinism. We talked about this with governments. We talked about this with empires. Size is an efficiency. So why do people like capitalism? If it doesn't care about you, why do people care? And that's where we come to our favorite capitalist of the last kind of decade of TV, Ron Swanson. Capitalism, God's way of determining who is smart and who is poor. Capitalism is the only way. It's what makes America great, England okay, and France, which is the most socialist of the three countries, terrible. The free market is a jungle. It's beautiful and brutal, and in good laissez-faire philosophy, should be left alone. So why do people like capitalism so much if it's so amoral and at times immoral? We literally last week just had a giant train derail in Ohio. And the train company, which was shipping all of these chemicals, these deadly chemicals, argued that, well, the train cars might blow up and make lots of destruction, or we should just burn off these deadly chemicals. And the decision was made to burn off the deadly chemicals. Okay, great. Right? It was the best of a bad situation. But by burning off those chemicals, it also meant you were poisoning the land, the people, the water. And even if the EPA and the train company, who's now going to have a whole town suing it, says, well, it's not so bad. Our studies, our science says it's not so bad, right? Well, who wants to live there now with the poison? It's like Love Canal in New York. Who wants to live there? Who wants to buy a house on a sludge pit? People of Palestine are going to get cancer in 30 years because of this. And who's going to be held responsible? Well, as a New Yorker, I know nobody's going to be held responsible because that's what happened with the Twin Towers. That's what Jon Stewart's fighting about. He's been fighting about it for 20 years. In fact, the costs are so expensive, but the timeline is so long out that nobody wants to pay for it. And so these first responders, these construction workers, these guys who are at the pit, who are at ground zero for months, are getting cancer now 25 years later. And it's like, well, we can't determine if it was ground zero. It may have been just anything. Cancer's a mystery. People get cancer who weren't at ground zero. Why should I have to pay for it? So why? If companies are so selfish, if capitalism is so immoral, why do people like it so much? And the answer is that capitalism allows more people to own more stuff and accumulate their own wealth, breaking cycles of generation poverty. Capitalism turns out to be probably the best economic system at enriching more people than any other economic system that humans have yet come up with. We're going to talk about communism. And communism works. Not the communism of Stalin, not the communism of Lenin. That's a different story, and we'll get to that. But the communism that humans have existed with, where everybody donates, everyone contributes, and everyone benefits. The communism of Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us. The communism of the chicken pot luck at the church social. The communism of Jesus and the 12 apostles. The communism of nomadic horse peoples and herders. For the first 5 million years humans have been around. Like, that communism works, but that communism works because people are poor. They have to share. They don't have anything. So of course everything they own is also owned by other people, because everything needs to be owned in common, because nobody owns anything. Everybody's poor and living on the edge of existence. So in all apocalypses, if you've watched Waking Dead, that's not capitalism. The Waking Dead is communism. Capitalism just dies in an apocalypse. We're going to talk about capitalism dying in the Great Depression. But that traditional, original form of communism, of communalism, works because people are poor. Capitalism works by getting people more than any other system. It allows you to accumulate wealth. It allows you to invest and become richer. And this is the most important part, leave it to your children. Leave it to your grandchildren to break generational poverty. So my grandfather came to the United States as a 7-year-old off a boat from Italy, not speaking any English, not knowing anybody. He literally just walked off a boat, walked into Lower Manhattan. I can't imagine doing that at the age of 7. What capitalism allowed was for him to somehow get a job, somehow get an education, somehow support himself, somehow then raise my father, who then raised me. And it was my grandfather's wealth that got me my paid for my first 4 years of college. I paid for my grad school, but my undergrad was paid for by my grandfather, who left money when he died to each of my brothers. The only grandchildren he had, he was able to leave. And so I've been able to take that money, turn it into an education that then got me into grad school. That grad school has gotten me this job, which has helped me invest and create retirement and buy a house and raise a family and do all of these things that other systems like feudalism didn't allow. You stayed what you were. When we talk about in History 101, we talk about the rich and the poor. We talk about the rich is the top 2% and the poor is the bottom 98%, and they don't change. This is in India, we talk about the caste system. They don't move. You don't go from being poor to rich. And you never go from being rich to poor. It's impossible. It's not impossible, but it's not going to happen. So capitalism allows for more diversity, more entry, more equality of opportunity, as we say today, and revolutionary change. Because capitalism doesn't care about your racism. Capitalism doesn't care about your sexism. Capitalism doesn't care about any of your isms. It cares about making money. And if a black person can make more money than a white person, it will hire the black person. If the woman makes more profit than a man, it will hire the woman. Now, societies that's where we get the patriarchy, right? We get archies, we get hierarchies, and we get things that kind of play around with who gets access to that. But capitalism doesn't care. That is exactly what Booker T. Washington said. And W.E.B. Du Bois said, is like, give us access and we'll do great. Through education or ending Jim Crow, give black folk access to capitalism and we'll show you we can be good capitalists. Capitalism also gives you hope. People don't think they will lose or that they will be ground up. You're in my class. None of you think that it's going to end badly for you. That if you make some right decisions, that if you're prudent on your investments, that you'll get a good education, you'll get a good job, you will succeed. Maybe you'll get rich, but you won't be. That there's hope. Right? You could borrow money fairly cheaply, buy a house, make investments, buy some stocks, get married, have some children, you can succeed. And all you need to succeed is money. That's it. And you can make it, you can earn it, you can inherit it, you can marry into it. But all you need is money. Why do people also like capitalism? Is hierarchy. That wealth determines who is smart and who is poor. That wealth determines who is better than others. I am better than you because I have more money. The rich are better than the middle class. The middle class are better than the working class. The working class are better than the poor. And you can move up and you can move down. But your access to better things, first class on an airline, gives you more room, better food, more respect from the employees. Who gets that? The rich. Or the middle class who can pretend to be rich for a day. It costs them more. They have to max out on their credit card a bit. They have to go into more debt to do it. They have to save up more. It's not as easy for them. But hey, it's a splurge. You can do it. You can enter it for a day. But rather than titles or birth or talent, wealth determines who's better than who. Chris Rock, I think it's Chris Rock, had a joke, and it's prescient to this, about rich versus wealth. That a lot of people, you can be rich, but it's wealth that determines if you're really rich. And he said, Michael Jordan is rich. No doubt about it, Michael Jordan is rich. The man who signs his check, that guy is wealthy. Because as rich as Michael Jordan is, he's still an employee of somebody else. And so wealth creates importance. You are important. Think about the famous rich guys today. Who's important? Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, right? Bill Gates. Why are they important? Because they're rich. Are they smart? Sure. But they're not important because they're smart. They're important because they're rich and what they can do with that money. Right? Warren Buffett is important because he's rich. And every year he sends out a letter about how to invest in stuff. And the people who want to be rich like Warren Buffett read that letter, the letter to the shareholders, like it's gospel, like it comes from Jesus. Why? Because Buffett is smarter than other people? No. Not on an IQ test. He's not winning Nobel Prizes in chemistry. He's rich. He's done well at making money. That makes him important. The only other thing that can make you important, equally important in this world, is an army. And that's Crassus at the end of the Roman Republic. Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar, Julius Caesar. Crassus was the richest man in Rome. But he didn't get the respect he felt he deserved. Why? Because unlike Pompey, who had conquered Syria and the Levant and shown up in Egypt, or Caesar, who had conquered Gaul/France, Crassus, well, he put down the Spartacus rebellion. But those were slaves, and, famous though they were, So what did he do? He took his money, he hired himself an army, and he went off to fight the other great empire out there, the Parthians. The Parthians killed him in a battle outside of Syria, out in Mesopotamia. They shot his army to pieces in the middle of the desert. But it's money or an army. That makes you important. And sometimes, many times, it's both. You need the money to have the army. That's Crassus. That's Putin today in Russia. So why do people hate capitalism? If capitalism is so great, if Ron Swanson is so great and so right, And Breaking Bad tells us that money matters. Why do people hate capitalism so much? Why does Bernie Sanders or Noam Chomsky or like college girls want to get rid of capitalism so much? Why does AOC, Representative Cortez, dislike capitalism? Well, because it privileges money over everything else, even government. Life, people, law, community, environment, they all come in second, third, fifth, ninth. That it's money, not people, not existence, not community. You will bury your father. You will bury your mother. And somebody is going to hand you a receipt for how much you owe to do so. And part of that is not that it's the cost of actually doing that. It's the cost of the profit for them to do so. So here you are in your most vulnerable state, in your most emotionally distraught state. And they're going to be like, so you know what your father would have really liked? This $30,000 casket with brass and gold. And, you know, we can bury him in the cold, hard earth, yes. Or, just saying, an Evian water, Perrier, bubbly, fountain-esque, only cost you for $50,000. Don't you think your father would have liked that? So, and you will be handed a bill that has the cost of the funeral, but also has, you know, a good chunk of markup for profit. And capitalism says you can't fault that guy for that. That guy needs to pay his bills, needs to put a little bit aside for his family. He needs to make a profit. But that's what capitalism does. Jesus says it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than the rich man to get into heaven. Because in Jesus' time, the only rich people were the Romans or people who collaborated with the Romans. See Matthew Levy. So he says it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. And I have seen preachers who are asking for money be like, well, you know what it really means is no. This is one of those like Jesus was very clear. Rich men can't get into heaven. Why? Because they do nasty stuff to be rich. In a world full of poor people, rich people cut corners. They hurt people. They did bad things to get rich. They worked with the conquering Romans, right? They sold out their fellow community. They did something. At least kings, and we've talked about kings this entire class, but at least kings had to maintain legitimacy with the people or with God. Here's Richard II at the end, right, of Shakespeare. Shakespeare's Richard II. This is the great Jesus figure of the kings of the War of the Roses. And Richard II is in some ways a terrible person. But he is facing a rebellion, and he looks at the rebels and says, we thought ourself thy lawful king. That, why are you rebelling against me? I have followed the law. Just because you don't like me so much, that doesn't mean you get to rebel. I am the lawful king. And then he goes on that, you know, God can overthrow me. You can't. But there's the idea that even kings, the richest guys in the country, needed to maintain some form of legitimacy. Capitalism says you don't. It's get rich or die trying. Right? As hip-hop would tell us, as gangster rap will tell us in the 90s, get rich or die trying. So capitalism has exploitive inequality, which is a feature, not a bug. Lots of workers must be poor for the owners to make the profits to be rich. The workers of McDonald's make $10 an hour, if they're lucky. The CEO of McDonald's cashes a check for $20 to $50 million a year. A year, not once, a year. Megan Whitman failed as a CEO of Hewlett-Packard. Failed. She was fired by the board, and when she was fired, she was given $40 million. Now, I would like to f up so badly that I got paid $40 million, and that was seen as a punishment because she could have made more if she stayed as CEO. So the 40 million was go away money. It was so much money she got to run for president. Think about that. That's capitalism. Did people she fire, the 20,000 employees she fired, did they lose their houses? Did they lose their college funds for their kids? Did they lose their investments? Did they lose lots of livelihood? Vacation time? Did the stress give them cancer or cause heart attacks? Nobody cares. They didn't get any money. They got a pink slip and a kick in the ass. That's why people hate capitalism. Slavery is what capitalism wants. It wants to enslave people so that you don't have to pay for labor. So capitalism benefits those who already have wealth or access to wealth, i.e., elite men. And in a racial world, it's elite white men. So it benefits those who already have the wealth. Capitalism is also anti-freedom. It profits from workers who cannot refuse to work. You saw this during the pandemic. You see this in more and more laws that are like, you're not allowed to quit. You have to work for a place. If you do their training, you must work for them for a year. Right? We see this in sports with rookie salary caps. You get drafted, you get $500,000, and you can't negotiate that money. Enslaved people, poor people without choices, women, children, animals who have no protection. That's what capitalism wants. You want cheaper eggs? Sure. But what does that mean for the chickens, for the hens? It means they must be treated worse. Want cheaper meat? Sure. That just means you have to exploit the pigs and treat them worse so that you can ground out more profit from the lower cost. Negotiation, asking people how much they want to be paid, is less profit. That's why companies hate unions. Because the union says, we all collectively, see, if one person refuses to work, F them, they don't matter. But if all of your teachers, all of your doctors, all of your pilots say we're not working, then the whole system breaks down. If one pilot says, I want more money and I won't work unless, I'll strike, I won't work unless you give it to me, well, F him, he doesn't matter. But if all of Southwest's pilots quit, Southwest can't fly. So they have to negotiate. That negotiation means less profit. What Marx called the vulgar political economy. That it was in capitalism's interest to treat people and animals worse. Look at Les Mis and how Fantine is made. Look at Mr. Burns in The Simpsons. Refuse to pay workers fairly, avoid paying what we owe through taxes, shame and blame people who use social services. Why? Because the first two are all about profits. If we don't do the first two, if we refuse to pay workers fairly and we avoid paying the taxes that we owe, then we make more profits. We make more money. And then we blame people who are using social services because they're lazy or they're unwilling to work. Why? Because that's what the taxes that we're trying to avoid, a lot of them go to. Charles Dickens tells us why this is bad, right? Marley, and I like the Muppet version of this, Marley and Marley come to Scrooge and they sing the song, "You're doomed, Scrooge. You're doomed for all time." He's a capitalist. And yet he is doomed, chained by his crimes that he's weaving, that he's binding himself to in life. Capitalism is not Christian. It's just not. which is understandable. Capitalism doesn't exist when Jesus and the 12 apostles are roaming the earth. All right, so we're about 40 minutes in. So this is a good time to take a break. We're going to stop here and we're going to start with part 2. We're going to have a new episode. We're going to do part 2, the death of capitalism, the Great Depression, where we talk about the Great Depression. So be safe, take care, and we'll come back in a little while for part 2. Thank you.